Will feminists advocate for men to be educated separately from women? You'd think they should, but I'll bet they never will. That's my subject on today's Fiamengo File. I'm Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa. One of the questions I received at the London Conference on Men's Issues concerns separate schooling for men at the university level. Given that men are so relentlessly vilified by university administrators and professors, deemed guilty of various threats, psychological and physical, to the female majority, why not create a totally separate system for men? As it stands now, women can choose to attend women-only colleges in Canada and the United States if they desire. In the US, for example, there are 39 women-only colleges, but although historically there were many all-male colleges, today there are only 3 left. In fact, the history of all-male colleges in the United States is the history of one after the other of such colleges being forced to open their doors to women, while the same has not happened to women's colleges. If men are such a destructive presence in higher education, then why not keep the sexes separate, with co-ed still a choice, perhaps, but a minority choice? I think it's a great idea. Let's educate men in separate institutions, and let's staff these separate colleges with academically heterodox professors, those who dissent from feminism and the other fashionable isms that dominate our universities. We could have a range of traditionalists and libertarians and free thinkers and even those outliers who practice male-positive teaching and scholarship. It's surprising, actually, that there hasn't been much public discussion of gender-segregated post-secondary education. The vast majority of debate concerns public schooling at the primary and secondary levels, where there is a vigorous debate with pro and con positions having been taken. The side advocating for single-sex education alleges that both girls and boys, and definitely boys, do better in single-sex classrooms where teaching materials and methods can be tailored to their particular learning styles and where they can focus on their studies undistracted by the presence of the opposite sex. In fact, a massive, systematic review of all the studies of single-sex and co-ed education conducted by the U.S. Department of Education in 2005 found that the majority of studies, quote, reported positive effects for single-sex schools on achievement tests, end quote. Where there is opposition, it tends to be, as far as I can tell, feminist in slant. In an article called The Great Gender Debate, for example, Dr. Lise Elliott, Associate Professor of Neuroscience at the Chicago Medical School, was interviewed in support of coeducation, arguing that differences in male and female learning and thinking are statistically very small. She stressed that, quote, most data shows that the more boys and girls have an opportunity to interact and have the same opportunities in general, the more similar they end up, end quote. The feminist agenda to make boys and girls similar, i.e. more like girls, is implicit in her argument. She opposes separate schooling because it supposedly, quote, promotes stereotyping and sexism, end quote. She isn't quoted as saying why, but the obvious implication is that any recognition of male-female difference is itself a form of sexist stereotyping. But there are many other reasons why separate schooling may be good and needful. And these ideas are not generally addressed in the literature because, of course, most of the literature is feminist compliant and therefore cannot even conceive of, let alone discuss, the reasons. The most pressing reason has to do with the war on maleness that is being conducted in our schools at all levels, and any arrangement that would save men from that war is seriously worth considering. Now, one would think that advocates for young women would support the idea of separate university schooling given all they tell us about what a dangerous place a co-ed university campus is for women, how constantly women are at risk of sexual harassment, discrimination, online stalking, and sexual assault. They tell us women are objectified, that they're held to impossible beauty standards. Apparently they experience low self-esteem in the classroom, leading them to speak less than men. They endure sexist comments, sexist put-downs, microaggressions, sexual pressure. Why wouldn't feminist advocates be more generally supportive of separate schooling? If parents and educators really believed that women faced a 1 in 4 chance of sexual assault at university, if they really believed that girls were entering an environment in which they were at huge risk of harassment, discrimination, and belittlement, why would anyone allow girls to attend? And why would the number of female students be constantly on the increase if universities were such bad places to be? The threat to women is vastly exaggerated, and the promulgators of the rape culture myth know it full well. The fact is that far from being places full of misogyny, university campuses are already, in essence, female-only schools. They just happen to have some men in them. These universities are designed to serve the needs of girls and young women, with men made to feel how very unwelcome they are. Official single-sex schooling would, in a sense, merely leave universities to the women who already are their primary consumers and would open other spaces to serve men, spaces not dominated by feminist ideology, in which young men would be taught subjects in a male-positive atmosphere, free of blame and free of indoctrination. Any attempt to institute widespread single-sex higher education would almost certainly meet concerted opposition, and it's not difficult to see why. Here are the reasons. One, most obviously, because young men would flourish, and that would embarrass the gender studies experts by casting widespread doubt on their gender theories. Freed from the constant shaming of feminist content in the classroom, and especially freed from the general campus climate of surveillance and suspicion to which they are subject, men would be able to focus on their academic subjects in a way that academic feminist hegemony has made increasingly less possible over the past couple of decades. The flourishing of young men under such a system would show that feminism is not, as is constantly claimed, good for men. The second reason, definitely not to be underestimated, is the fact that the implementation of separate schools would cause feminists to lose thousands of easy, high-paying, government-funded sinecures in the equity offices, the counseling programs, the women's advocacy centers, the sexual harassment wing of the student services, and the human resources departments that deal with women's complaints about men's behavior. All those services that exist on campus to monitor men's actions and attitudes and to repair the hurt or outraged feelings of women and to adjudicate their grievances. All these could be shut down, saving taxpayer dollars and putting a lot of women out of work. Finally, and most importantly, feminists wouldn't welcome male-only post-secondary schooling because feminists would thus lose access to men. There are opportunities to recruit men to feminism, to browbeat men into being ashamed for having sexual feelings, to harangue men about their so-called privilege, and to convince men that anything they achieve and everything generations of men before them achieved is illegitimate because it was created through their unearned privilege. All that would be lost. That would be unacceptable because feminists need access to college-age men. They need them weak and ashamed, confused and convicted of guilt. They don't want them to have spaces of their own where they may revel in their abilities without apology, where they can form positive friendships with other men, and where they can learn about being a man in an atmosphere free of female scrutiny and criticism. That would risk the entire feminist project with fewer men willing to betray themselves and others. For all these reasons, I'm sure that were any attempt made to set up a new center of higher learning for men only, it would immediately face a legal challenge to deny it accreditation. But even by feminist logic, the single-sex university is an idea whose time has come.